there are plenty of different people that talk about the topic, plenty of people that certainly have shaped the way that I think about the topic. But I started studying this, way back, wow, or like mid 1990s. I mean, I became a college head baseball coach in 1995, so that probably shares exactly how ancient I am with some of this stuff. But I started studying culture there because obviously winners are different. You know, winning organizations, successful businesses, they're different. They just have a different way of doing things. And I saw it early on, you know, people that were maybe fair performers would go into an environment in the college baseball world and they would become high achievers. People that had been high achievers might transfer to another program that had a weaker culture, and they would struggle. Their performance would diminish. And the environment mattered so much. And even growing up in the small town that I grew up in, you know, I think the environment kind of shaped the culture of the town. It changed a lot, the average people's expectations and what they thought might be possible. So I think culture permeates everything that we do. And it's this wonderful thing that can bring out the best in people, or on the flip side, probably prevent people from reaching their potential. So I want to talk with you. I've got basically a step-by-step way that I think about culture. I'm not saying this is the only way that you can think about it. I'm not smart enough to think that there's only one way to look at it. But for me, there's this like 7 keys that kind of work in sequence, or 7 steps that work in sequence that have to be in place if we're going to build a strong culture that drives what we do. And just to give you a little bit of background, I mean, I think I've done a pretty decent job with this sort of stuff. I mean, it's obviously always a work in progress, but I mean, I took a baseball team that had never had a winning season in program history, that had a 500 season, never winning season program history. They eliminated scholarships, but remained in a scholarship division. And I took that team to a 5th place finish in the World Series 5 years later. They were kind enough to give us 1.7 scholarships that year. So, you know, it didn't matter that all the opponents had 12. So we did, you know what I mean? So we were able to build an organization that worked like that. But maybe one of the cooler parts of it is there's probably not been a single week in the last 20 years that has gone by that one of my players that played for me didn't text me or call me or email me or visit with me. I mean, I was texting back and forth with 2 of them yesterday. So, you know, culture was great for performance in the moment, but it also built strong relationships that lasted over time. Culture, I think, was at the root of why my first training business in a town I literally had been to one day in my life before we opened, grew from 0 to 420 clients in about 18 months in a town of 23,000 people. Culture is probably at the root of why 3 years running my company was named one of Kentucky's best places to work. It 3 years running was named Franchise Business Review's the top franchise for franchisee satisfaction. So basically, the people that we serve, the people that would be like you guys, you know, top of all franchises under 500 locations in North America, not just fitness, not just health and fitness, all in North America, from franchisee satisfaction. And even now, my current business, which will be celebrating its 8th anniversary on Sunday, we have had 0 employees leave or team members leave in 8 years. So I'm guessing you probably can't go find any business in your respective town that could say the same thing if they have more than like 3 employees, and usually all 3 are like family members. So, so just to give you an idea, like the things that I'm talking about aren't unique to like one set of circumstances. They're not unique to one type of business. I've worked with them being local businesses. I've worked with them sports teams. I've worked with them in franchises that also had international licensees as part of it. So things that were global, and all these principles all kind of held true. And the first one is that it all begins at the top. The leader sets the tone. Without leadership, none of the rest of it matters. The leader can lead by example and lift everybody up. They can be the person to kind of rally the troops. They can be the person who models all the rest of this stuff. And as much as anything, they have the ability to make everybody feel valued, important, and connected. On the flip side, a leader can alienate all sorts of people. They can advocate their responsibilities. They can do all sorts of things to drag it down. They can make it about them. You probably, if you know me at all, you know that my family does a bunch of stuff at Disney. We've been, gosh, I don't know how many times to how many different Disney places. They've had some interesting leadership changes over the past 5 years. They had one of the most well-regarded CEOs of the 21st century. They're leading them for a while. Lots of growth, lots of employee satisfaction, a lot of improvements in stock prices, all that stuff. He left, they replaced him with somebody else. Admittedly, that guy kind of stepped in during a tough time in the pandemic. He was definitely not as much of a culture building guy, and the stock price dipped by over half. Dipped by over half at one point, and it still stayed down about 80% for a long time. Employees, there was a lot of friction, a lot of internal turmoil. They replaced him, and it already started to trend back up when they brought back the previous CEO. Same company, same assets, same departments, all this stuff, most of the same employees. And it just, that leader was able to change the tone of so many different things. Now, admittedly, leaders are human, they're flawed. So I'm not going to say any of them are awesome at everything, but without leadership, again, none of the rest of this stuff matters. If you don't have somebody setting the tone at the top, it's hard to rally around. It's hard. People aren't going to do great work in spite of a leader for an extended period of time. Sure, you may get people to come in and work for their own reasons for a short term, but the leader kind of drives everything else. So the leader also really kind of establishes what I want to talk to you about with the second key, and that is vision. They really set the tone or create the vision, depending on if it's an established company, somebody comes in a leadership role, or if they're the one establishing this from day one. They basically say, hey, this is what we want to achieve and why we want to achieve it. I'm not saying that everybody is going to be driven by this vision, but it's a rallying cry. It's more like this kind of umbrella that keeps everybody safe and dry. It's this one thing that everybody stays connected under, right? Because if you don't believe in the vision, if you don't believe where somebody's going, then it's a job. It's not a career. It's not something that you're going to stay aligned with. It's not, if you don't believe in the why, if you don't believe in that mission that somebody wants to achieve, if you don't feel like there's forward movement or upward mobility or greater opportunity for you, and that's all part of the vision. They need to see what the future holds, and they need you to paint this wonderful picture, this very vivid description of, hey, this is where we'd like to be 3 years, 5 years, 10 years from now. This is who we're going to help. This is what we're going to accomplish. This is, this difference we're going to make or this impact we're going to have, and you get to be a part of that. You could be a driving force in that. And that's really what the vision is, because it helps everybody focus and it keeps them motivated on a daily basis. It's this thing that draws everybody back to moving in the same direction. So, you know, a lot of people love to focus on the tactical stuff and they lose sight of this. But I mean, if you don't have something that is pulling you towards it, right? Like if you don't have this kind of impact you want to have, this legacy that you want to create, this opportunity that you're developing for the people in your ecosystem, it's hard to keep people excited about it, right? Because let's face it, people are definitely aligned with their own self-interest. They have other opportunities. So we may be, you know, just a stopping point for them along the way for some season of their life. But if you want to keep people there longer, they have to believe in this grander vision. So we've got the leader that really sets the tone for everything. You know, if they show up and they do great work and they inspire people, and not every leader has to be the same, right? Like some lead more vocally, some lead more by example, but we need a leader, we need a vision, and then we need values. And for me, values are an interesting topic, right? Because for a while back when Zappos was kind of being touted as like the beacon of all things, you know, culture-wise, they would talk about everybody has to have core values. And so all of a sudden you'd go around, you see every gym or every small business that I saw, it seemed like they had their core values on the wall, somewhere on a sign on the wall. And then you would see the behaviors of the employees. You'd see the actions of the employees and you'd be like, man, these two things have never met. They've never even read this sign. And so we need, with values, to know that these are like the principles, the guardrails. They're how we make our decisions. They're how we think, because let's face it, if you're going to hire good people and you're going to empower them to do things, not everything goes by the playbook. There are always going to be gray areas between things that they've been trained on, things that they've been taught. They need to understand your vision, your values. They need to be aligned with these values so they can make good decisions that they know are in the best interest of both the person that you serve and the organization as a whole. So when you're making your choices, these are your guardrails. And when you're hiring, these are your guardrails. Now, I'm not saying that everybody that has that comes on as an employee has to have precisely aligned personal values with yours, but they have to align with the overarching values of the organization. They have to believe in the values that you've established, and they have to be able to embody those. In fact, something I did all the way back when I was a college baseball coach, I mean, we're talking, you know, at this point, over 20 years ago, throughout the fall, I'd have all our seniors talk about one of our values. Each senior would pick a value and they would do a talk about it, and they'd say, this is what it means to them, and this is an example of it in action. And, you know, we continued on and did some of that with team members along the way. And I think that's such a practical way to look at this, right? Like, I don't need to know that you can memorize a tagline. I don't need to know that you can memorize that, you know, we have this value on a board. I need to know how that plays out in our daily operations. And so we need things that don't just sound good. They actually shape our decisions. They help us make choices all the way from hiring to customer service choices to, you know, what we're going to sell, how we're going to make money, all those sorts of things. All right, so we got leadership, we have vision, we have values. Now we have standards of performance, because basically our standards are basically these measuring sticks or whatever else, these daily barometers or weekly barometers that say, okay, we've got this bigger vision, we've got this grander vision. Now we're breaking this down to individual roles, and each person has roles, they have responsibilities. What does success look like? What does being great at this job look like? Because if you have somebody on your team and they're compelled by the vision that you've created, they need to know how they play their part. They need to know what being great at their job looks like. So many people, they've never been told that. There's this kind of almost ingrained expectation we may have as a leader, as an owner, as a founder, but maybe we've never articulated that. Maybe they don't know what being great at their job looks like. Well, that's the standard of performance. And it's, these daily things that we have to do that help achieve the vision. So we have to know, like, okay, if you're going to be a salesperson in this business, this is what being great looks like if we're going to reach this vision. If you're going to be a coach for our team, this is what being great looks like if we're going to reach this vision. So people want to be good at what they do. So many people kind of question today's younger generations and what they're going to do. And hey, they're not that motivated, this, that, or the other. You know what? Human beings want to be good at whatever they're doing. On average, they want to be successful. They want to feel like, hey, I'm validated because I'm good at whatever task that I've taken on. Like, nobody wants to be the worst at something. So we need to tell them what being great at their job looks like. And, everybody says they need systems. And make no mistake, we teach people systems. We have the SCALE program that's about to roll out here. And the systems are great, but you got to know what a system is. It's basically just a consistent process so you can meet your standard of performance. You have a way that gives you a higher probability of doing things on a regular basis so you can meet this standard of performance. That's all a system is. It's like, hey, wait a minute. This is what being great looks like. This is how we can get there day after day, week after week, month after month. And that's what a system is. And, it is a documented way that we have achieved success in executing a process, achieving a goal, reaching a standard that is still, it's not written in stone, right? Like, you haven't chiseled it it's in pencil, because if there's a better way, then we want to keep evolving and keep improving. But that's where the system falls into place. Now, we're down to number 6. Number 6 is people. And this is probably the biggest mistake I see people make when they talk about culture. They say culture is all about people. Culture is all about hiring the right people. I have seen more great people flounder in bad environments than you could possibly imagine. I've seen them flounder in bad sports teams. I've seen them flounder in jobs. I've seen leadership change in a job, and somebody who went from being a high performer to becoming somebody who just kind of struggled to get by, always kind of having one foot out the door, looking for a different opportunity. People need to be set up to succeed. And so you could get somebody who is potentially an absolutely wonderful person, but if you give them the wrong environment, if you don't create the right situation for them, they're not going to reach their potential. They're not going to be nearly who they could be if you put them in the right environment. And they're probably going to be a short timer for you, because they're going to be, like, great people are going to seek out great environments. They're going to seek out great cultures. And they're going to leave as soon as they get the opportunity for something better. So the first thing when we're thinking about people is they need to embrace the vision and values. That's kind of like the foundation, right? They need to embrace those, because if they don't, we're always going to be out of alignment. We're not ever going to be really on the same page. But if they're aligned with you on that, then everything gets a little bit easier. Then second, they need to know what the standards are, right? They need to know, hey, this is what's expected of me. If I'm going to be great in my role, this is what is expected of me. most people hiring do a terrible job of this, right? Because they say other duties is assigned and just leave it as ambiguous as possible. I can't tell you the number of business owners that have come to me in our industry that sit down like, how can I get my client, or how can I get my trainers to generate more referrals? Like, is it in their job description? Have you taught them to do it? Then why in the world would you expect it, right? Like they don't know that that's part of their standard of performance. It's never been articulated. They've never been taught to be great at it. So you're just pushing your problems onto somebody else. So they need to know what the standards look like, and they need to have the attitude and aptitude that they want to be the person to meet those standards, right? They have to be excited about it, and they have to have the ability to do it. And not everybody has the same set of abilities. I have an limitless number of shortcomings that I would probably fail miserably in many, many roles if you said, okay, are you going to be great at this job? So you need to put people in the right seat when they, when you've heard Jim Collins talk about being in the right seat on the bus, that's it. They got to get it. They got to like it. They have to be excited about it. And they have to be capable, right? They have to have the aptitude and attitude to be great at that job. So know the standards. And then finally, hire the right fit. Don't hire the resume. Hire the right fit. Hire people. I mean, selfishly, as a business owner, we spend probably more of our waking hours associated with our business than anybody else. So above all else, I'm going to hire people I want to spend time around. So hire the right fit, or else you're going to make yourself miserable and you're going to make them miserable. People hire resumes and experiences. I'm hiring intangibles. I'm hiring character traits. I'm hiring people that have the potential, have the interest, have the desire. And then because it's my standards of performance and it's my systems, I'm going to take the responsibility for making sure that they can succeed in their job. And if they don't succeed, I can trace it back to me 100% of the time. I can say, hired the wrong fit or didn't help them succeed. And finally, number 7, you've got to communicate, right? I liken this to like when somebody says, I need a playbook. I need systems for everything. I said, well, me being somebody who's been around sports all my life, even if you give somebody a playbook, you still practice the plays. You have to practice the plays. So we've got to relate to people. We've got to connect. I probably think of myself very much as a managed by walking around, or in the world that I'm in now, where all of the people, except for one, are not in the greater Louisville area that are part of our team. I'm kind of managing by virtually walking around, I guess. But it's, you relate to people. I care about people's lives, not just the role that they play in our business. And I think you would be well served to do the same. I think that when people know you care about them, you're always going to get the better version of them as best as they can deliver, right? And when I say that, people are human. They've got varied bandwidth. They've got plenty of other things on their plate. Everybody has full lives. But if you want to create an environment where somebody says, look, you know what? The owner, the leader, they're rooting for me as a person. They want me to succeed. It starts with relating to that person. Okay. Number 2, we need to recognize them. Everybody is really good at talking about constructive criticism and crucial conversations or whatever else. You know what I'm really happy about is the opportunity to catch people doing things right. I want to be able to tell people I'm proud of them. I want to be able to tell people they did a good job. I want to be able to notice things that they may have slipped by or took for granted. And I think that we get plenty of that other stuff everywhere else in life, right? So if you can create an environment where you're catching people doing things right, where you're recognizing them for doing a good job, you're going to be better off. And then kind of along those same lines, we need to reinforce all that other stuff, the vision, the values, the standards, the systems. This is a living, breathing thing because it's operated by humans, right? This is not a machine. This is operated by human beings. So we're going to have to reinforce it continually because people drift. People have different things, take up mental bandwidth. And so maybe they lose focus or they lose sight. People have all sorts of shifting priorities. I mean, all you got to do is have somebody on your team that just had a newborn. And all of a sudden you're going to say, well, man, I should probably be reinforcing some things, right? And making sure that they know, hey, I relate. I understand where you're at. I understand all the stuff you have going on. So here's where we need to be now. And here's what's realistic for you to do, and here's how we're going to do it. I mean, we have to coach people. You don't manage people. You lead people. You coach people. You help people succeed. You don't manage them. You don't hold them to a checklist as much as you make them really, as best as you can, make them excited about wanting to follow the checklist, right? So that's it. I know I kind of rushed through a lot of culture stuff because frankly, you know, I think there's a lot of gray area in there that I would love to talk about if you guys have any questions. And then that's probably another opportunity for me to remind you that if you want a copy of the book where I dive deeper into each of these areas, you know, I unpack every one of them with a little bit more depth that you can dig into and get more ideas. So if you want the book, put it in the chat, put it in the comments. All right, man, we already have one question. Tony wants to know meeting frequency with the team. I think first and foremost, I would say structured team meeting once a week is probably my default setting, but management by walking around, I'm probably somebody that if I could talk to everybody individually 3 times a week, I would. You know, and it may be 2 minutes. It may be me asking Matt about the concert tomorrow that he and his daughter are going to tonight. It may be, you know, talking to somebody about, you know, a project they just started on or something that they're doing and getting feedback. I don't think, you know, I think there's 2 sides of this. I think there's the structured team meeting that's once a week, and plenty of people will give you excuses to why they can't do once a week. All those excuses are BS. If it's a priority, you make it happen. And if it's a priority, you pay people to be there, just like you would a training session. So you find a way to do it. But then beyond that, I think the individual meetings are where you get to build camaraderie and loyalty, and people know that you care about them as a person, not just as, you know, a piece of the puzzle. All right, Morgan, your hand was up next. What you got?
You'd think by this many years I'd know how to find the mute button on Zoom, but never. My question is, you said you want to hire because it's the people you want to hang out with. And
I said that's a piece of it, right? Like you hire because of fit. And so think of it this way. If I'm going to say for the next 10 years, Morgan, Jamie, you guys are stuck spending 20 hours a week with me in a work setting, I should probably consider that, right? Like I should probably think, man, 20 hours a week, that's 1,000 hours a year, 10 years, that's 10,000 hours. We're going to be hanging out together. Do I want to hang out with you for 10,000 hours? More importantly, do you want to hang out with me for 10,000 hours, right? So that has to be a consideration. And people who overlook that, I think they're insane. I mean, it's our business. We're the business owner. We get to decide, like, if somebody is like fingernails on the chalkboard to us, then we probably shouldn't hire them. Now, that's not the only variable, but that probably matters as a variable.
And do you do any, like, obviously when you like are in the hiring process, you look at the resume, you can ask them tactical questions. Is there any like personality questions that you ask to still, because if you sit down and you talk to them once or twice, how do you really know if you could spend the next 10,000 hours? So is there anything that you kind of point out and keep in mind?
So I probably, and mind you, I'm not an HR professional, and I've had an HR firm come and work with us when I had a bigger company and all that stuff. I would tell you as many open-ended questions as possible. References are to be called. People that have an experience with this person are to be called, even if they're not references. If you can call the boss at their previous job and they're not a reference, you should probably call them. Almost all of my people that have been part of what we do, I had a pre-existing relationship with, so it was kind of like interview without being interviewed. I would tell you of the people that have come and done stuff for me over the last 8 years, or done stuff with me is probably a better way to put it. The two that I knew the least are the two that I'm talking to right now on the screen. So, I've done all the personality tests, all the disc profiles, all that stuff. And I think it's valuable. I think if you're trying to find a role, getting a feel for, somebody a D or an SC, whatever, I think that stuff matters. But I also think that ask questions, don't be in a hurry to hire somebody, do your due diligence. Typically hire people that you get to spend some time around. That's why interns are always good if somebody's hiring coaches and that sort of thing. Like, I want to see somebody in their most normal environment. And so when I've brought people like Matt or Doug or Justin or Fred into the fold, I already knew them. I had seen them when they weren't trying to get a role in my organization. They were clients or they were people that I knew, and that's when you're going to find out the most. So if you're having to hire direct and you don't have that luxury, then you try to manufacture as much of that as possible. You just create as much open space for people to let their guard down and be themselves as possible, and do as much discovery as you can. Because again, I want to hire people and set them up to succeed in roles. I'm not hiring somebody predisposed for a role. And I kind of do things differently anyway. I think both of you guys would attest to the other business coaching stuff that you had been exposed to maybe versus what we do. So if I hired somebody with like that on a resume, like, oh, I'm a business coach or something, I mean, I'd have to unwind everything that they had learned and reteach it my way anyway, right? So it doesn't help that they already have that experience. All right, Jamie.
So I want to piggyback off of Tony's question about frequency of team meetings. Oftentimes, at least with our team meetings, we get in the weeds all the time of the stuff. And you brought up that values exercise, which I love stuff like that, and being able to just learn how someone thinks. How often do you sprinkle in culture-related exercise into your team meetings, or are you strategic about it, or do you just do it as it comes?
I would probably talk 95% about culture stuff and 5% about tactical stuff if I was left to run all the meetings. In fact, I would say I'm putting you two on the spot because we have meetings on a weekly basis. I'm pretty sure that I'm the one who prompts the questions about all the other stuff in your world first, right? Like what's going on in your world, right? Like, I'm not usually nearly as focused on, well, hey, what's this metric or what's that? I mean, week to week, that's not my priority. Week to week, it's like the people are my priority. So I probably have to caution myself not to just consume the entire time being on that side of the fence. And so it's not the other, right? Like, and I'm even probably more sensitive to that in the environment where people are virtual. So, because there's not the quote unquote water cooler talk, you don't have that as much here in this type of setting. So I feel like that's in those settings, I feel like that's my number one priority. I don't know if it's my number one job, but it's definitely my personal priority. All right. Other questions. And again, if you haven't put book in the comments, chat, wherever, you should. Because you're not going to find that one. I don't think it's on Amazon, or I don't even know. But it's not one that we go run ads to like we do the Fitness Entrepreneur Handbook or whatever else. So I'm biased. I think you want the book. So you should probably say book in the comments. All right. Any other questions?
I have one, Pat. So I think we talked about this a little bit at the mastermind, but we have our dream team, right? But they only come in an hour to 13 hours a week. So they're all at another gym. I've known them for several years. So our challenge is always getting together to have meetings. We do individually talk to them when they're in the gym, and just, really, they're literally the dream team. So there's not much to say bad about them to them. We're just always building them up and saying how much we appreciate them. We are doing a dinner at my house for just all of us coaches so we can all get together. But outside of that, we only do, we're going to do videos. So, hey guys, we're talking to everybody all at once. Can you think of anything else that would be, it feels weird not to have us all together a lot, but everybody has a different schedule.
Well, so first of all, everybody has access to free Zoom, so you could certainly do that. And you can even find ways to make it fun. With our little IBIC group that Holly and I do, where they're just a small group of people who want a little bit more kind of masterminding stuff, and we do it like on 6-month intervals. I guess it's once a month. Heck, they may do it a little more than that. Holly hosts kind of a sip and plan meeting where they all grab a glass of wine and plan their week. And I overheard one of the Voxer messages yesterday saying how that was just such a game changer for somebody. And that's like the 4th person I've heard say that. Nice. So, one of the things that I think the pandemic reminded me, taught me, however you'd like to say it, is not everything has to fit into the box that it may have before. Like when we think of team meetings and somebody says, well, I can't get everybody together. I'm like, man, it's not true. Like I've held team meetings in December with my little baseball team and had like college coaches come on as guest speakers, like on Zoom. Like, so we didn't have to meet at a facility to do it, so there are all sorts of different ways that we can connect with people and, spend time with them. And even if during a team meeting, somebody can't be there or whatever else, it's fine, right? Like then you do something different with a different group. And over time, it averages out, right? Like, so it doesn't have to be perfect. It has to be better than it is today is the way that I always look at it. Like, what can we do to create more connection, more community, get people to, like you mentioned, hey, there's not a lot of stuff we need to fix. Good. Then reinforce and relate. Like you don't have to, doesn't always have to be a fix. Sometimes it's just, this is working. Let's make sure this keeps working.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you. Appreciate it.
All right. Any other questions? Yes, I was waiting.
You mentioned the seat on the bus. And what do you do to figure out if they are on the right seat or check in? Like, how do you make sure the right seats on the bus are filled? And what do you do to notice gaps in the seats?
I am 1000% sure I view this so different from most people. So, ironically enough, I had a little bit of this conversation with Morgan yesterday, I think. I want to know what people want to do. I mean, I'm just generally curious, like what excites you? What's a non-starter for you? What's fulfilling to you now? I am like, I want to preface that by saying, be careful what you wish for, because if you're saying what you think somebody wants to hear, you may be stuck in a seat that isn't awesome for you, right? So, but I want people to be, that's part of building a relationship. So people will be willing to say, you know what, it sounded good, it ain't for me. So for me, that's like number one. Like there are very specific constraints as to the types of seats that are available in every type of business. So it doesn't always mean that everything always lines up perfectly, but if I'm using a filtering mechanism, that's the first one I have, because if I can get somebody to believe this is the right place for them, that's the best place to start for me, right? Way better than saying, well, this is the seat, can you wedge yourself into it? And so I want to know that first. And then second, I kind of want to do a temperature check with some regularity, like what's going well, what's not. I mean, obviously you have data in most any instance that can give you insight as to what's going well and what's not, but I want to hear their perspective too, because statistics can come from many different places for many different reasons. And I want to see if these statistics line up with their sense of the role. And, and then I have to kind of counterbalance that, right? Like I have to say, well, okay, maybe this isn't performing the way that I want. They like the role. Have I set them up to succeed in the role? Have I made it a role that has a high probability of success in itself? So, I think it would be the best example I could give you for the purposes of the audience that we have here, like fitness business owners. Let's say that somebody loves coaching clients and they have this wonderful decorum and you think, man, they're the perfect fit. And you have them coach a group training class at 2 p.m. Well, they could be the best coach on the planet, and I may have given them all the systems to be successful, and they may be executing them perfectly, but 2 p.m. may just be a time that is destined to fail. And so there are these variables that we have to consider that, when you're putting somebody in a certain seat, you're basically saying, I want you to be great at this role because this is you being great at this role gives us a much better chance to reach this vision. Well, maybe the role needs fixed. So I think does this person feel like they're the right fit in the role? Have I set them up to succeed in the role? Is it a bad role? Like I need to kind of toggle between all of those things, I think, to know. And I'm probably not a manage by the numbers person in that sense, because I think that statistics can kind of show you whatever you want them to show you depending on how you choose to use them. But like if you wanted to get rid of somebody, you could easily say, well, hey, this class is underperforming. But if I'm looking at this with some context, I can say, that class just isn't going to be great. It would be like, hey, I want my restaurant to do great at 3 p.m. Well, good luck. It's not going to. So doesn't matter how good your server is, doesn't matter how good your cook is. It's not their fault that we're trying to fix something that's not really fixable. So I don't know if that answers that for you, but I just think that there's usually more to it than a lot of people kind of want to look at. All right. Other questions? Anything else anybody want answered? Jamie, I knew you'd have multiple questions on this stuff. Morgan, any other questions? Do you want to catch up with Jamie on the race to most questions?
I don't have any more. My biggest one was the one I asked because it's finding that right person. And the person I hired was somebody I've known for years. She's worked with my mom, so I didn't have to go through that weeding process. But I know eventually I will have to. So when that time comes, how do you find that personality? And I really, like you said, the mentorship or the internship is a really good way to really get to know people. So yeah, all of that was super helpful.
I mean, I'm old and I've been married for a long time, so I've never been on a dating app or something. But I think that it's probably a little bit like a dating, like you're posting a resume online, right? Like you're basically saying this versus, oh, wait a minute, I've spent a bunch of time in the same social circle with this person and I know this person. I mean, who are you going to have a better sense of? Doesn't mean either of them are a great candidate or a bad candidate. I just know that for me, I'm always recruiting. I am always looking for not only more people that might be a good fit down the line, but I'm also looking for people who may be good conduits to find good people. I talked to somebody yesterday and he mentioned what town he was in and he said, yeah, I need to hire somebody. And it, ironically enough, I happen to be on the exercise science advisory board at a university in that town. And so immediately it's like, okay, I can call one person or message one person and say, okay, here's a connection. And now you're not cold calling anymore. You're not doing anything like that. It's, now we can dig in and get more of that. Well, we all have some of that at our disposal. It's just a lot of people, they default to, hey, I'm just going to post something on Indeed and hope. And that's fine. I'm not saying that's a bad option. I'm saying it shouldn't be the first option. All right. Any final questions from anybody about any of this stuff when it comes to culture? DJ, you got any questions here? No?
Just soaking it all in, man, because as a sports person, I get it, man. Like culture, when I've been on teams that just had that good culture, I say it's just easier to perform. Like it's just so much positivity and you feel like you can flourish, and I've been on situations where one player was bigger than the coach, so everybody kind of just was afraid of him, and it was just a terrible situation, and it was hard to win. So you realize, I didn't even think about how that would work in the workplace. I'm just like, oh wow, yeah, it could trickle down from the leaders. So I think hopefully me and Jen do a good job, so.
Man, 98% of what you learned in your time as a collegiate and professional athlete, and even dating back to probably your time as a youth athlete, would be applicable here. I would say that most of my business philosophy is rooted in my time as a college coach. Not all of it. And obviously, some of it's rooted in screw ups I made as a college coach too, and learning experiences. Right. But it's very similar. It's, you're trying to help people. You recognize very quickly. And that's where a lot of this stuff, when you think about the total person, that's where a lot of this started. It was this simple for me looking back then, thinking, you know what? If a guy's going through a breakup with his girlfriend, he probably wasn't going to be nearly as focused when we had a conference doubleheader that Saturday. You know,
Facts.
if somebody just struggled on a final exam or something like that, they're probably not going to be as locked in. So, I mean, just understanding that it became very obvious. And obviously, as life goes on, a lot of this stuff gets magnified. And we have so many other things on our plate, so many other responsibilities and things tugging at our bandwidth. Then, but it started there. It was very easy to understand in that kind of little microcosm how things work. And you know, how do we set somebody up to succeed? How do we show them we believe in them? How do we, you know, try to bring out the best in them? And I think you learn very quickly in that environment that rooting for somebody and helping them is way more effective over the long term than kind of bullying them into doing what you want them to do.
Yeah, yeah, I like it. And it made me think too, I like it. A lot of times you're on the bus or you're in the locker room with these people so often that you know their lives so well. Like here, I see why we have to have so many more meetings and just conversations so we know their lives better, and then just cheer them on from there or just help as you can. So
Yeah.
okay, it makes sense why the meetings are so important. That's the locker room now.
That's it. That's it. See, how about that? It's always good when you get professional athletes to give you a little bit of insight and reinforcement on some of this stuff on Zooms. I like it.
Yeah,
All right.
I like it.
All
Thank
right.
you.
My pleasure as always. Jamie, any other final questions? Did you go come up with 6 more or something?
Of course. This is like I love this topic. But back on that locker room concept, when you see a star player and you're like, oh, if he just had that edge at that one thing, how do you encourage the development in a way that excites them to do it?
I mean, so I think you catch people doing something right first and foremost, right? This is going to be like, you guys are just going to have to trust me that this is the same, because a lot of people don't equate them. So I had a little baseball practice yesterday with my 12U baseball team, and I'm trying to get a couple kids to pitch that haven't traditionally been pitchers. And my number one thing when I'm working with them is every time they get one thing right, it's like a celebration. It's not like, oh, you didn't do this right, or you didn't do that, or whatever else. It's like, man, I am going to reinforce all the small victories. So you want to repeat that. So there's that whole Pavlovian thing where, we want you like the positive feedback. So you're going to try to do that again. And, I think that's a big piece of it, but I think it's also, and this isn't exactly what you asked, but it's related. Not everybody gets to be the star player. Plenty of people get to be the role player. So I want people to also understand that our job is to be, as effective and successful as they can in the role they're asked to play. And, and we want to celebrate that just as much. In the baseball world, the kid who's our number 8 pitcher that might pitch, 1 inning in a weekend, he needs to get just as much positive feedback for his 1 inning as the star pitcher might get for throwing 5 innings in a weekend. And I don't know if most people think that way either, right? Like, it's always like, let's celebrate the stars. I'm like, no, let's celebrate everybody for winning their own race and being a better version of them. All right. We got a hand up. Let's go.
I was just going to say, from a martial arts and jiu-jitsu point of view, I like to try to make everybody the star player of their own sport in a way, I guess. Like, anytime, like, if somebody is talking to me about problems with their jab, like, hey, well, Devin snaps his hand out freaking perfectly every time. Like, if you focus on this activation that he obviously has down pat, and then, you can toss it over to him, or like saying something that encourages somebody without even directly encouraging them, I know you watch Devin on the bag, then a little bit later, and his jab is snappy as heck because he got that little call out from you. So I like to try to point out the ways that other people in the class are succeeding and what they're especially good at for other people to try to pick off of, and encourage them at the same time. You know what I mean?
I think martial arts is a wonderful environment to learn plenty of business lessons and plenty of coaching lessons as well. So I think that all too often we get very myopic and we think that, I just have to learn from what all these other gyms are learning from. And frankly, that was probably my biggest advantage as a business owner, was that I did not come from the fitness industry in a traditional, like, commercial fitness sense. And it meant that I was going to do things a little bit differently and I could learn from other things. And I was curious to learn from other industries that I could draw similarities from, whether it was hospitality or, I learned a lot from various kind of private practice medicine type of facilities. I learned things from, any sort of customer service type of business, anything where I could draw lessons. I wanted to kind of aggregate them into what I was doing here, because frankly, I couldn't be better than my competition by simply being a kind of a bad imitator of them.